Well, college football is over for this term, and I kind of wanted to leave my opinion. Obviously, being a Florida State fan, we were left out, which kind of stings to us still to this date. But I don't want to get too in depth into that because I've made plenty of videos in the past on this. But obviously, I find that the committee's decision not only affected the team, it affected our program, and I believe it has affected the ACC into something more than what I think is just being omitted out of the playoffs. Is I think the future of college football was definitely highlighted. One of the things I find that obviously FSU made their mistakes. I think in signing in 2016 with the ACC, knowing that maybe that this isn't the conference to stay with. I don't understand why we would do that. Hopefully those people that made that decision are no longer there. But the other one that I wanted to kind of talk about that before the portal and NIL, but it's the fact of the players. I didn't watch the game, but I did see the highlights, and the players that were sitting on the sidelines at Florida State probably shouldn't have been there. I think that NCAA should start putting out rules that basically state that if you don't graduate from that college, you don't get to go to the bowl games and sit on the sidelines. If you're one who's opting out from being in the game, entering the NFL or very, very early, and not getting a degree, or entering the portal, you shouldn't be on the sideline at all. Verse and Travis, obviously they graduated, and any other players that were graduating that were seniors, that's fine that they wish to be there. And I'm not knocking the fact that people go off to the NFL. But the fact that you're sitting there cheering and seeing your team getting stomped by Georgia was not exactly something to which, the fans wanted to see you on the sidelines. So I definitely am kind of upset with Coach Norvell allowing that. But more importantly, I think the NCAA should probably start setting rules on that to try and prevent some of that from happening. As you noticed, what Kirby Smart talked about is I think the Florida State versus Georgia game and not being in the playoffs, I think opened up a world of something that's going on in college football, and that's the portal system making it like a free agency. And I think that that's affecting a lot of things. As you could see in the portal, you're going to start to see these recruiting classes that, like Georgia, who just got a bunch of recruits this past couple months. It doesn't really mean anything because if they don't play for Georgia within the first year, they could probably disappear and take off. And I find that the portal players also create where there's no care to play for the university anymore. Most of the portal players for Florida State probably don't care at all that they went to Florida State or were going to a college. And I think we're missing out on what was important was these kids to go to college. And I think that needs to show more emphasis into it. Instead, we're treating this as just a beginning for the NFL. And it's just a money-making thing. Obviously, I still think that the committee did that. I think the committee made their decision for money. They listened to a bunch of, announcers saying how boring the game was between TCU and Georgia the previous year and how, they don't want to see that again. To me, they listened to the wrong people. You should have been listening to the coaches. The coaches, if you would ask probably any of the coaches outside of Alabama and Texas, they probably would have said that Florida State should have been in there. So I'm not going to keep going back to that and whining about it, but I still think that had its consequences, and it still does. The portal and the NIL is a disaster. NIL is not managed correctly. Florida State's in trouble, I know, on some of it right now, but you can't really blame it because there's really no set of people setting the rules and what this is supposed to be. It's just money being thrown at players and college players. The portal is, I don't understand why they open it up so early, just before the bowl games. Before you know it, these bowl games won't have any meaning whatsoever. And how's the NCAA going to enjoy the fact that if these bowl games, who are heavily sponsored, are going to start pulling out saying it's not worth doing these games because the players aren't going to play in them? If it has no meaning as a playoff, then why do we play in these things? And I think that it's turning into just this money organization, and that's what I'm afraid that college football is doing. It's just getting worse and worse. ESPN, all these announcers and stuff, they don't care about the fact of these kids going to school. All they care about is their ratings. And to sit there and say, well, we wanted the 4 best teams, what does that even mean? Because if you were to sit there and say your eye test of the best teams and you're not caring about the fact of the future of college football, then what are you looking at? Because if you were to sit there and just take this past weekend, you had Green Bay go into Dallas. Green Bay shouldn't have been allowed in the playoffs according to the committee. But yet Green Bay goes into Dallas, who's 16-0 at home, and defeats them not only a little bit, but by a lot. Green Bay wasn't supposed to do that. If you look at the eye test and you say, I'm a Buccaneers fan, you got the Buccaneers versus Philly. Philly's won 10 games straight pretty much throughout this year. They were 10-1. They were the NFC champions from last year. They should have killed the Buccaneers. But instead, the Buccaneers killed them. So your eye test doesn't work. This committee thing doesn't work. This is why I believe that it should go to the NFL rules. Get rid of the conferences and go to where I think it was like 64 teams. Give each school a chance. Give them the opportunity. And I think that with the conferences, it's just it's lopsided. It's like all SEC. Is that what we're going to do, is just go under one big conference of the SEC? Is that what you want? I mean, the Pac-12 is already pretty much eliminated, and the ACC is going to take a dominant hit if Florida State leaves, because Clemson and Miami possibly are going to be right behind that. So I'm not understanding at the end of the day what NCAA is trying to do with college football. I think they're turning this into a money game, and it's sad. These kids are not going to the schools to get the education that the school. They're getting offered these scholarships, to which many kids would love to have a scholarship, and instead they're treating it as it's a business, and that they're just trying to fly through it in the sense of, I want to get noticed to go in the NFL, or I want to make some money. Ultimately, I think that's what happened with our second-string quarterback with Rodmakers. He just decided he was going to enter the portal to try and make a little money, because he probably knows that he's not going to get in the NFL. But the sad thing is, I think coaches saw through that, and I don't think anyone's going to take him, to be honest with you. But that's another issue that we can talk about. But I'm just curious about your thoughts about, what do you think about not having conferences anymore and going to like what the NFL has? And quite possibly, do you think the NCAA should have rules that say that you can't be on the sidelines unless you graduate from that college? I'm just curious what you think. Let me know.